That's what people are looking for.
Yeah, a big gripe about illegal workers, I'm just not labeling anyone,
Right.
is that they don't pay the taxes, and a lot of people that employ them don't buy or don't pay for workers' compensation, which is extremely burdensome on legitimate businesses. And I think it's an issue that needs to be addressed.
Absolutely. My wife runs a very clean business and operation there, and that's where you learn like hardworking people. And then as you watch the problems that grow throughout the community, you want to make sure that you pay your proper share of taxes. And that's the number one concern most people do. You pay your fair share, and it's owed to you.
Fair is fair.
Fair is fair, absolutely.
Equal playing field.
Absolutely.
If everyone has to be burdened with ridiculously high workers' compensation,
everyone should be paying their fair share.
If everyone did, it would probably actually lower the cost of workers' compensation insurance.
And if you don't, then creates what's called maybe an illegal economy that's going on, why people are getting things off the books, on the books, and then this drives a culture of crime. It could drive a culture of violence that we don't want it to happen around here. And occasionally in the village, you'll see some of this crime that goes on here, and it's not based upon not hiring people, employees, or the right way of doing it, but basically people need money. So if they don't have the money, they resort to other resources, whether it's burglarizing or robbing people. Not that it's happening in the village again, but these type of activities tend to lead to other things. I mean, We've had drug arrests in the village of Brewster already. You know, we've had operations by the Sheriff's Department and arrested people for drugs. And we live in a small community, and you know, we're locking 2 or 3 people up at a time. It's not good.
Well, I think now we're talking about something that people say, well, I don't care about illegal immigration, but now we're talking about drug use, and drug use is something that affects every family, whether it's the family members involved or a friend of the family. Drug use among teens is a very big problem, I believe, in this county, and I believe you feel the same way. What do you think we can do about this?
Well, you and I have gone to high school, we've gone to college. I've gone to high school many years ago, and we tend to know who's the guy dealing drugs all the time. And there's a certain group of kids always run over, and they got the joint, and they have the pills, and they have whatever. And yet again, in the year 2008, it still goes on in our schools. What are we doing about it? And you can then look at New York City. What are they doing about it? And someone says, oh, you can never change the culture. But you have to change the culture because it affects our kids today. So whether you get your school resource officers more involved in it, you get the school board more involved in it, you get the
Start enforcing the law.
Absolutely. Start enforcing the laws, and it's not hurting anyone's feelings. But this culture needs to stop. Drugs need to go away from our schools. I mean, why do we have signs that say drug-free zone? And yet they still sell drugs there. And this is going on for years. Your generation, my generation, generations to come. Whether it's the middle school, the high school, drugs are there. It needs to go away.
What can you do as a councilman, though? Education, programs, what?
Same thing as education programs, which we've done for many, many years, but it's to get more involved. Whether it's the parents getting involved, the students getting involved, the school resources officers getting involved, the school superintendent getting involved, everyone needs to be on the same page and sit down and do the same thing all the time instead of talking and talking. Before you know, you're talking another generation. We need to see results. I mean, I saw that when I was in New York City. You changed the culture in 1994 from crime out of control to all of a sudden crime is no longer the catchphrase. In 1980, crime was the catchphrase. It's no longer the catchphrase now.
Yeah, I remember. I mean, change can happen. You mentioned before when Rudy Giuliani's crime initiative. I used to travel in New York City quite a bit, and just before Rudy Giuliani came into office, and it was not. Taking the F train at 1 o'clock in the morning was not fun.
Right.
And very soon after Rudy got in there, he said he did what he said he was going to do, and it can be done.
It can be done.
It was safe to ride the train at 1 o'clock in the morning, then it didn't bother me.
Right.
We can do the same thing here?
Absolutely. I mean, we're looking at some big city crimes happening in the village of Brewster. We've had a homicide a few years ago. That doesn't happen in small communities, but yet it does. And certain people say, well, you know what, it's just a small group that's doing it. No. You should not have a homicide, whether it's a small group or it's a neighbor or it's someone that you know. Homicide should not happen. Now we have homeless people dying in the streets. That shouldn't happen either. And then someone says, oh, you know what, it happened in the town or it happened in the village. Oh, there are enough social service programs out there where homeless people should not be dying in our streets up here. We have stabbings. I'm not portraying the village as being bad, but these are crimes that should not be happening here. And then what does it lead to next? Whether it's a drug culture up here or a community where gangs begin. I know my campaign mentioned gangs and gangs and gangs. Is there a gang problem here? We don't know. But when you see big city crimes, we do have problems up here.
Dwight, we're here to talk about a very serious issue which affects everybody that lives in the town of Southeast. which is the town budget. In these economic times, people are very concerned about how their money is spent, both by them personally and by their elected officials. I know that you are a very ardent supporter for reform on the fiscal spending habits of the town of Southeast. And first, we'll talk about your desire to give people a break economically with a tax cut.
In January, when I was elected, one of my first missions was to look at the books and see how the town is spending money, whether it's in too many vehicles, employees, how we leave the lights on at night. So I made it my mission to go research some of these items. And as we went through the year, the supervisor and I, we cut the budget by 10%. And it was to our credit that we did something like that. However, when I went through the budget and through these last few months, I researched some of these items that go on here. I tend to wonder how this town has been spending the money, and a lot of it is not done wisely. I mean, I go through certain things, whether it's computer equipment or whether it's hours spent or recreation funds and fees like that. I tend to question a lot of them, and I do question. I bring in the department heads, I ask them simple questions. How are we spending money? And one of the main concerns I had was when we get these vouchers and the voucher system that we have in the town.
Well, explain it, how the voucher system works.
Okay, basically the voucher, when someone says a voucher, is basically a piece of paper that is put on top of a bill or an invoice. And I get it as a councilman and I review it. And it should then correspond with some of the documentation on there. When I first got on board, I would get a voucher with no documentation. I would question, what is this for? Hopefully, and going forward now, the town has changed that policy where we do have receipts out of it. Some of the receipts, though, I question also now. I mean, I had a big question about $9 worth of batteries that someone had bought. And the practice of that individual buying $9 batteries, I wanted to know why. Why was someone buying $9 batteries? And then
I mean, it sounds petty, but actually, it's not your money or their money to spend, it's the taxpayers' money.
Absolutely, it's the taxpayers' money. And we go for these tax cuts because today in this economic crisis that we're having, no one predicted this months ago. But I'm glad I looked.
I did.
You did. I'm glad you did. But going forward in January, February, I looked at the numbers to make sure the books are in order. And then as we go through this, we're looking for hard times now. I mean, the worst is yet to come. And yet we still were able to cut the budget by 10%. But because of our town board, we battled over it. And
I believe I talked to the supervisor, and I think that he, or you and he had asked department heads #1 to do voluntary cuts.
Right.
Which you did receive.
Yes.
And I think by your final number going into the last budget meeting was about 14%, which of course leaves room for give and take.
Give and take, absolutely. But because of our town board, I have to say to the town that we only cut the budget by 1.4%. Which is still a cut, but it's nothing though. But those are some of the battles I fight though. But my tax cut and the supervisor's tax cut was to take the fat out of the budget.